Welcome to another deep dive. Today, we're going to Sweden. Well, not for the typical tourist attractions. We're going behind the scenes of Swedish universities.
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, to try to understand how growing political control and bureaucratization are impacting their core missions.
Yeah.
The teaching and the research.
It was a fascinating situation, really, because, it goes beyond just looking at education policy, right?
Yeah.
We're sort of like examining how broader trends in government oversight are shaping the daily reality of academic life in Sweden.
Exactly.
I mean, that's...
Yeah, and our main source for this deep dive
Yeah.
is a 2024 research report from Uppsala University.
Oh, wow.
It's
Interesting.
packed with survey data from university leaders and department heads.
Oh, so we're getting like a firsthand account from those. You're
Yeah.
navigating this changing landscape.
This could be interesting to hear what they have to say.
Yeah.
What's striking, when you look at this report,
is how it reveals a system that's become increasingly complex over the past few decades.
right?
A key turning point
Yeah.
was the 1993 higher education reform, which introduced like a wave of new goals for universities.
So like back in '93.
Yeah, back then.
Back
It
then.
really was a big shift. Think about it. Collaboration with external partners, increased student influence in decision-making, a strong push for sustainability,
Right.
internationalization.
Wow. Okay.
The list goes on and on.
So it's not just about, excelling in teaching and research anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
They're being asked to juggle all these additional objectives.
Right.
Sounds like a pretty tall order.
It is.
Yeah.
What's interesting, though, is how these goals have translated into a proliferation of internal guidelines and policies and action plans.
Oh.
Yeah. We even see the creation of like specialized departments and vice rector positions dedicated to these new priorities.
So basically,
Right.
in response to these new goals, they're adding
Yeah, more like.
administrative layers.
Yeah.
I could already see where this is heading, more bureaucracy.
Yeah. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
The report highlights how department heads are feeling the weight of this, especially when it comes to managing sustainability and internationalization initiatives.
Oh, okay.
They're bogged down by paperwork and reporting requirements.
Right. So far cry from focusing
on.
on academic endeavors.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of feeling overwhelmed,
Yeah.
let's look at how these general laws are hitting university departments.
Oh, okay.
It's not just education-specific policies they're dealing with, is it?
Absolutely not. Swedish universities, just like most public institutions,
Right.
they're subject to a wide range of general legislation.
Right.
Think workplace environment laws,
Okay.
equality regulations, data protection like GDPR,
Yeah.
public procurement rules, financial administration. It's a long list.
Wow. So they're really being hit from all sides.
Yeah.
I can only imagine the
Right.
added layers of complexity this brings.
And you'd be right to assume that. The report highlights that these general laws often mandate detailed processes and plans.
Right.
And, of course, documentation.
More documentation.
Right.
Yeah.
And what's surprising is that department heads find the administrative burden from these general laws much heavier than the education-specific ones.
That is surprising. I would have assumed the education-specific policies would be more demanding.
Yeah, it is interesting, isn't it?
What makes these general laws so problematic for them?
Many of them feel that these laws aren't really tailored to the unique needs of academia. They specifically call out employment law,
Right.
financial administration,
Uh-huh.
and public procurement as particularly burdensome.
I can see how those could be tricky areas to navigate in a university setting.
Mm-hmm.
Do university leaders share these sentiments?
They absolutely do. There's a strong consensus among university leaders that general legislation is creating, a significant administrative strain.
Right.
And they also point to the role of oversight agencies
Oh, okay.
in interpreting these laws, sometimes in ways that create even more
Right.
bureaucratic burden for universities.
So it sounds like one regulation leads to another, then another, and another.
Yeah.
A bureaucratic snowball effect.
Yeah. You've hit the nail on the head.
More regulations, more administrative positions,
Yeah.
and even more procedures.
Right.
It's a vicious cycle.
It is. It's not just external pressures, though,
Okay.
but also the internal responses that contribute to this cycle.
Right.
But before we get into that,
Okay.
let's take a look at another form of external pressure they face,
Okay.
government directives.
So on top of laws and regulations, they also have direct instructions coming from the government.
That's right. These directives can come through general regulations, right? applying to all universities or through individual letters with specific assignments.
Oh, okay.
Interestingly, university leaders generally find these directives less burdensome than the general legislation.
Really? Why is that?
Well, directives tend to be clearer, I guess, in terms of expectations and often have, a more direct link to the university's core missions.
Oh, I see. I was going to say there's got to be a catch. What's the catch?
Universities have minimal influence on the content of these directives.
Oh, okay.
They're essentially told what to do and how to do it,
Wow.
limiting their autonomy.
So they lack...
And when it comes to those specific assignments that come through separate decisions, those are viewed as highly burdensome.
Okay, so they lack control.
Right.
And often don't have enough time to
that's a
complete the tasks.
That's a challenge for them.
That sounds frustrating, to say the least.
It is. Now, let's add in one more external pressure. Consultations.
Consultation.
Yes. Swedish universities, especially the larger, more established ones, are frequently asked to provide feedback on proposed government policies and reforms.
So
they're pulled into the policymaking process, which sounds great in theory.
Yeah, I bet it adds to their already overflowing plates.
Right.
Yeah. How does this contribute to their...
Well, it takes time.
Administrative burden.
It takes considerable time and resources to analyze proposals and formulate responses.
Right.
What's particularly interesting is that, according to the report, universities offered minimal pushback when many of the laws we discussed earlier were being drafted.
So even though they had the opportunity to be sound, they didn't raise concerns about the potential for increased bureaucracy.
Yeah. It does raise an important question, doesn't it?
It seems a little counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are universities accepting this burden too readily?
Right.
Now, there were a few instances where they did push back. For example, when environmental regulations were being drafted, they wanted to highlight their positive impact.
Okay, so it's not that.
Right. And one university...
They're completely passive.
Even warned of dire consequences for research when export control laws were being tightened.
Oh, wow.
So...
But it seems their opposition is selective. This brings us back to that internal snowball effect you mentioned earlier.
Right.
Where does that fit into all of this?
That's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
The report explains how universities create specialized administrative positions to deal with the influx of regulations and requirements.
Right. Which, on the surface, seems like a logical response.
It does.
You need someone who understands the rules and can ensure compliance. It seems like a necessary step.
Right. But here's the rub.
Okay.
These experts often have like a very narrow focus, honed in on their specific area of expertise. They may not be considering the overall impact of their work on the organization as a whole.
So they're doing their jobs well, but it's inadvertently creating unintended consequences.
It's somewhat ironic, isn't it?
Yeah, they're almost creating their own bureaucratic traps.
Yeah, and to make matters worse, these expert functions often interpret laws and regulations very literally, even overly strictly. They're trying to avoid scrutiny from auditors and oversight agencies, which leads to, a culture obsessed with documentation rather than outcomes.
So the focus shifts from achieving meaningful results to meticulously documenting processes.
Right.
Yeah. Instead of asking, are we making a difference? They're asking, can we prove we followed every single rule?
Right.
It sounds like they're so focused on paperwork that they're missing the forest for the trees. They're more concerned with having a document than actually implementing, information security practices.
Precisely. And it's not just the expert functions either. Even university leadership and academic bodies sometimes contribute to this bureaucratization by creating overly detailed policies and procedures.
So it's really a system-wide issue.
Yeah.
You can see how this well-intentioned push for broader goals has created a real administrative tangle for Swedish universities.
Exactly. But before we jump to conclusions about Swedish universities being doomed to become bureaucratic black holes, let's step back and consider. Are there parallels in other countries? Are universities worldwide facing similar pressures?
That's a great question. This lack of control over directives is a major pain point for university leaders, as it limits their ability to set their own agendas. It makes you wonder if the pursuit of accountability, while important, can backfire and stifle the very things we value in higher education.
Right.
What do you think?
It's a complex issue. There's no easy answers. But what I find thought-provoking is the idea that universities may need to find a way to push back against this rising tide of bureaucracy,
right?
To reclaim their autonomy and focus on what truly matters.
To reclaim their autonomy and focus on what truly matters, absolutely. It's not about shirking accountability,
right,
but finding a balance that allows for innovation, creativity, and a genuine pursuit of knowledge.
Well said.
This has been an eye-opening dive so far. We've uncovered how external pressures lead to internal bureaucratization, the specific areas that are most burdensome, and the concerning shift from results to process.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
But this is just the beginning. Stay tuned for part 2 of our deep dive, where we'll examine how this bureaucratization is impacting research funding and the structure of academic careers.
Can't wait.
Yeah.
Should be interesting.
It should be good. Welcome back. Last time, we explored how external pressures from legislation and government directives are driving internal bureaucratization in Swedish universities. Now let's shift gears a little bit and examine how this is impacting research funding.
Right.
A critical aspect of academic life.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's a real catch-22,
That's right.
On one hand, you've got Swedish universities that are increasingly reliant on external funding for their research, right?
Right.
It's become a significant source of income, especially as government funding tightens.
That makes sense. We're seeing that trend globally where universities need to seek out alternative funding sources.
Right, right.
But I have a feeling this is where the, quote-unquote bureaucracy problem really kicks in.
You're spot on. The very processes that are designed to ensure accountability and control over external funds are actually creating a massive administrative burden for researchers.
It's like they need the funding to survive.
Right.
But the process of getting that funding is sucking the life out of their research.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
It really is.
How are researchers coping with this tension? Between needing the external funding and the administrative burden it creates.
It's a constant struggle, to be honest.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine applying for grants with complex guidelines and detailed budgets, right?
Right.
And you've got to do extensive documentation to justify every aspect of the research.
Right.
Then once the grant is awarded, guess what?
More paperwork.
The reporting requirements kick in. It's incredibly time consuming.
Yeah, it sounds like a bureaucratic black hole.
It is.
Instead of focusing on, groundbreaking discoveries, they're drowning in paperwork.
That's the unfortunate reality. And the irony of it all is that many of these procedures are meant to prevent misuse of funds, but they end up diverting the researchers' time and energy away from their actual work.
Right. So it's
the classic case of good intentions gone awry.
The classic case of good intentions gone awry. What can be done to address this? I mean, is there a way to streamline the process without sacrificing accountability?
There are a few potential solutions, I think. Some people argue that funding agencies need to simplify their application and reporting processes, make them less, onerous for research.
So make it easier.
Yeah, exactly. Make it easier. Others suggest that universities could provide more administrative support to researchers, freeing them up to focus on their core activities.
Right, so kind of shifting some of that burden. Yeah, it sounds like it.
Right.
Finding a more efficient and less burdensome system, but still ensuring, responsible use of funds.
Exactly.
Now, this bureaucratic creep, it isn't just impacting research funding.
Right.
It's also changing the very structure of academic careers.
Exactly. And this brings us to another, concerning trend. The rise of short-term contracts.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. The dreaded world of contract work.
Yeah.
It's no longer just a gig economy problem. It's creeping into academia as well.
It is. It's becoming increasingly difficult for researchers to, secure permanent positions. They're hopping from one short-term grant to another, never quite knowing what the future holds.
That sounds incredibly unsettling. I can't imagine trying to conduct groundbreaking research when you're constantly worried about where your next paycheck is coming from.
It's a precarious situation.
Yeah.
Especially for those in early career researchers,
Right.
They face constant uncertainty, right? Not knowing if they'll be able to continue their research or, build a stable career.
Right. It must be incredibly stressful.
Yeah, it is.
This constant job insecurity makes it difficult to plan for the future.
Yeah.
Put down roots or even, start a family.
Exactly. The reasons for the shift towards short-term contracts, they're, multifaceted. I mean, part of it is financial constraints, right?
Right.
Universities are hesitant to commit to permanent positions.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When funding is unpredictable.
Right.
But the report also suggests that the emphasis on accountability and measurable results plays a significant role.
That makes sense. How does that tie into the increase in short-term contracts?
Universities are under immense pressure to demonstrate that their research is producing tangible outcomes, right?
Right. So,
publications, patents,
deliverables,
innovations. And these outcomes are often tied to specific grants or projects.
So when the funding runs out.
So does
the job.
It's like a hamster wheel.
It is, yeah.
You need to show results to get funding, but the funding structure makes it very challenging to produce long-term impactful.
Yeah, it's a system that seems to reward short-term gains over long-term investment in research and talent.
That's precisely the problem.
Yeah.
And I worry that this focus on measurable results could also incentivize researchers to pursue, safe research projects rather than those bold.
So if you're constantly worried about your next contract,
you're
not going to take as many risks, right?
You're less likely to take risks or pursue research that might not have, immediate quantifiable results.
Right, you're going to play it safe.
Yeah, exactly. And this focus on short-term outcomes and safe research could ultimately hinder the kind of groundbreaking discoveries universities are meant for, right?
Yeah, it's almost as if the system is working against itself.
Right.
Undercutting the very innovation it aims to promote.
It's a paradox.
Yeah, it is a paradox.
And it raises a critical question. How can we ensure accountability without stifling the creativity and long-term vision that are essential for, true scientific progress?
It's a question that needs to be addressed.
It is.
Speaking of potentially stifling creativity, this brings us to another way.
Right.
The bureaucracy is shaping academic careers.
Yeah.
The pressure to publish. The infamous publish-or-perish culture.
Yes. The pressure cooker of academic publishing.
It's become a dominant force in academia.
Yeah.
And the report suggests it's intensified in recent years. Academics are judged, promoted, and even funded based on the quantity of their publications.
Churning out papers instead of...
Right. It's almost like a factory turning out papers instead of nurturing knowledge.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's led to a highly competitive environment, where researchers often feel pressured to prioritize quantity over quality.
Right. But isn't there a risk?
Or even worse?
That this focus on quantity undermines the quality and the integrity of the research.
Yeah.
It's like judging a book by its cover, or in this case, the number of pages.
That's a valid concern. The report points to a few ways this pressure plays out.
Okay.
For instance, we see a rise in what they call salami slicing.
Salami slicing.
Yeah, where researchers break down a single research project into multiple smaller publications.
Okay, so instead of one...
to boost their output.
Comprehensive, in-depth study.
Right.
They're splitting it into bite-sized...
Yeah, bite-sized publications to...
Publications to inflate their publication numbers.
Inflate their publication numbers.
It seems like a way to game the system.
It can be.
Yeah.
While there are, legitimate reasons to publish multiple papers from a single study.
Right.
This practice is often used to, artificially inflate publication numbers.
What are some other, concerning trends they're seeing in this,
Yeah, another issue is the growing influence of journal impact factors.
Oh, yeah, refresh my memory.
Yeah.
What are impact factors again?
Well, it's a metric that measures how often articles in a particular academic journal
are cited by other researchers.
Okay.
So the higher the impact factor, the more prestigious the journal is considered to be.
Right, so it's basically a way to rank...
Yeah, essentially it's a way to rank journals.
Journals, based on their influence.
Based on their influence.
So academics are under pressure to publish in...
even
high-impact journals.
Those journals aren't the best fit for their research.
It sounds like a popularity contest.
Yeah.
More than an indicator of quality.
You're catching on. This overemphasis on impact factors can really distort, research priorities.
It seems like the research agenda is being driven by metrics rather than by genuine scientific curiosity or a desire to address real-world problems.
That's a key takeaway.
Yeah.
This focus on metrics over substance can negatively impact the diversity and quality of research, ultimately hindering scientific progress.
This all paints a rather bleak picture of academia.
Yeah.
It's disheartening to see how the very structures
meant to support an advanced academic work are actually hindering it. Is there a way to break free from these constraints?
Well, that's a valid concern. But it's important to remember that these challenges aren't insurmountable.
Okay.
By openly acknowledging these problems and, engaging in honest conversations, we can work towards solutions.
Okay.
It's about shifting the focus from short-sighted metrics to fostering a culture that values quality, long-term vision, and, genuine intellectual curiosity.
It's about getting back to the heart of what academia is all about.
Exactly.
We've explored how this bureaucratization is impacting everything from, research funding to academic careers.
Yeah.
But there's one crucial piece of the puzzle we haven't addressed yet.
The human cost.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How are these trends impacting the well-being and mental health
of the
individuals working in these universities? That's what we'll delve into in part 3 of our deep dive.
Looking forward to it.
Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of Swedish academia.
We spent the last 2 parts, unpacking how increased political control and a surge in these bureaucratic processes are impacting research funding and reshaping academic careers.
Right. Now it's time to explore the human side of this complex situation.
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the systems and structures, but ultimately this is about people, right?
Absolutely.
How are these trends affecting the well-being and mental health of the individuals, who make up these universities?
Yeah.
The professors, the researchers, the lecturers. What's the toll on them?
Well, this 2024 report from Uppsala University doesn't paint a very optimistic picture, to be honest.
Okay.
It reveals, a growing concern about the mental health and well-being of academics.
I can't say I'm surprised, considering everything we've discussed so far. What are some of the key findings in the report that point to this?
Well, there's a clear pattern of, increased workload and stress among university staff.
Yeah.
Department heads and university leaders. They're grappling with an avalanche of, administrative tasks, reporting requirements, and the constant pressure to demonstrate, systematic work on all these new goals.
That's a lot.
It's no wonder they're feeling strained.
Yeah.
Right?
It's like they're being pulled in a million different directions.
Exactly.
Constantly trying to keep up with the demands of this increasingly complex system.
And of course, this pressure trickles down to individual researchers as well.
Yeah.
They're facing, fierce competition for limited funding and unrelenting pressure to publish, and often a precarious job market dominated by short-term contracts.
We talked about that in part 2.
It's a recipe for burnout,
Absolutely. That alone is a major source of stress and anxiety.
Yeah.
But you add in the pressure to publish, the constant grant writing, and the ever-growing administrative burden. It's almost like the system is setting them up to fail.
That's a powerful way to put it.
Yeah.
And the report confirms that these pressures are taking a toll.
Okay.
Many academics report, feelings of exhaustion, anxiety, and even disillusionment with a profession that was once their passion.
That's so disheartening to hear.
It is.
Academia should be a place where, intellectual curiosity thrives, where people feel inspired to push boundaries and make new discoveries.
Yeah, exactly.
Not a place where they're crushed under the weight of, bureaucracy and performance metrics.
It's a valid point, and it raises questions about the long-term, sustainability of this system. I mean, if we continue down this path, will we lose the brightest minds to other professions?
Right.
Professions that offer, more stability and less stress.
More stability.
Will we stifle, innovation and creativity because people are too afraid to take risks or pursue their true intellectual passions?
Are there any specific examples from the report that really illustrate this human cost? Stories that capture the emotional impact of this bureaucratic shift?
There are several, yeah.
Okay.
One department head is quoted as saying, "It feels impossible to navigate."
Wow.
They're referring to, the sheer complexity of the administrative burden and the constant feeling of being overwhelmed.
Right, like they're drowning in a sea of paperwork and procedures.
Exactly. Struggling to keep their heads above water.
Another researcher described feeling like they're constantly, jumping through hoops, trying to meet all the requirements and expectations placed upon them.
Right.
There's a sense that the joy of discovery, the passion for knowledge is being suffocated by the need to constantly document and justify every step of their work.
It's sad, really.
It is sad.
When you hear stories like that, it makes you wonder, at what point does the pursuit of accountability start to harm the very people it's supposed to serve?
Right. It's a difficult balance to strike.
It is. And it's not just about the individual suffering either. This kind of environment can have a negative impact on the quality of teaching and research as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's easy to see how a stressed and overworked academic would be less engaged and inspired in their teaching.
Yeah.
And when it comes to research, this pressure to publish quickly in high-impact journals can lead to a focus on safe research topics rather than the bold, innovative ideas that might take longer to yield results.
Exactly. It creates a system that prioritizes short-term gains over long-term vision, potentially hindering the kind of groundbreaking discoveries that can truly, advance knowledge and benefit society.
So it's not just the individuals who suffer, it's the entire academic enterprise. It seems like this bureaucratic creep is eroding the very foundations of what makes universities so valuable. What can be done to address this? I mean, is there any hope for positive change?
There's always hope. The report offers a few suggestions, I guess, for course correction.
Okay.
But it will require a collective effort from universities, policymakers, and, the academics themselves.
Give us some hope here. What are some potential solutions that could help turn the tide?
Well, one idea is to, streamline administrative processes.
Okay.
Reducing the reporting burden on academics.
Less paperwork.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
This could involve, simplifying grant applications, consolidating reporting requirements, and just finding ways to make these processes more efficient and less time-consuming.
So free up their time.
Yeah, it's about freeing up their time and energy so they can focus on what they do best. Teaching and research.
Less paperwork, more time for actual work. That sounds like a good starting point.
Yeah, I think so.
What else can be done to, support academics and create a more sustainable and fulfilling work environment?
Well, universities can also play a crucial role by, providing more support for mental health and well-being.
Oh, okay.
This could include, access to counseling services, workshops on stress management, work-life balance.
Right, so really supporting...
And creating a culture that acknowledges the pressures academics are facing.
Right, and creating a culture of care within these institutions.
Yeah.
Recognizing that their well-being is essential to their success.
Perhaps most importantly, there needs to be a shift in the way academic success is measured. We need to move away from the publish or perish mentality and start valuing a broader range of contributions.
Moving beyond the narrow focus on publication metrics and recognizing the value of, teaching excellence, mentorship, community engagement, and innovative research, even if it doesn't lead to immediate high-impact publications.
It's about taking a more holistic view of what it means to be a successful academic.
This has been a truly fascinating, albeit somewhat sobering, deep dive into the state of Swedish universities.
It has.
We've seen how external pressures and internal responses have created a system that's becoming increasingly bureaucratic, impacting research, academic careers, and most importantly, the well-being of the individuals who dedicate their lives to these institutions.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with a sense of possibility. These challenges are complex. But they're not insurmountable.
They're not.
By having these open and honest conversations about these issues, by questioning the status quo, and by advocating for a more humane and supportive academic environment, we can start to create positive change.
Absolutely.
Change that allows universities to truly flourish as centers of intellectual exploration, innovation, and human development.
I like that.
It's a goal worth striving for.
Couldn't agree more.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We encourage you to continue exploring these questions, to think critically about the state of higher education in your own communities, and to share your own thoughts and experiences. Perhaps by working together, we can find ways to create a more sustainable and fulfilling future for academia.
Until next time, keep diving.